as a marketer, when people have these kind of queen bee mindset that they know where the queen is and they can, the queen knows they're supporting them, so they're totally good with you contacting them. When they're that close, everything we do in marketing gets a little bit easier. If I need a testimony, if I need somebody to do a video, if I want to interview somebody, if I need feedback on something, the people in your speed dial that pay you money are people, you're in the same hive together. Those are some of the ecosystem and some of the symbols and some of the evidence of that you're getting this right.
Welcome to the B2B Digital Marketer Podcast, a podcast helping you to end your struggle with digital marketing, helping you to pave a new and better path to target and capture your ideal customer. Each week, we teach you how insiders and experts debunk the dreary and become engines of innovation. Now, here's your host, Jim Rembach.
Okay, B2B DM gang, man, we're going to have a fun conversation today because we're going to learn a little bit about how do you pollinate your 2022 so that you have greater levels of success. Because I'm having a conversation with Erik Newton today. Erik, welcome.
Thanks, Jim. Great to be here.
Man, we've had some really good discussions that we haven't recorded, and I hope we get them all recorded for you to be able to watch or listen to because this is going to be good. So, Erik, before we start getting into us having a great dialogue and discussion, if you could tell a little bit about your background and experience and how you can add value to the B2B DM game.
Yeah, sure. I've been in marketing for almost 30 years, and I'm currently the VP of Marketing at Milestone Inc. And we were an agency, and now we are a MarTech software provider, solutions for websites, for SEO, for local, and we help our companies grow, work in B2B and in B2C companies. My jobs have typically been in acquisition. And, I've been managing people for about 15 of the last years. I've had teams under me that I had to make productive. What's interesting about my current team is that we're based all over the world. So we're kind of running around the clock. And it's particularly freeing during COVID when everybody was remote that I have team members in Bangalore and in Ahmedabad. And everybody's as productive as can be, particularly because they work the night shift with us. So we're all on at the same time. And I couldn't be, I wouldn't see them in person anyway. So a lot of interesting developments, with COVID and with management, but also gives you some time to think, doesn't it, Jim? Like you got more time to be introspective and retrospective about what we've been doing and how can we do this stuff better?
Well, you bring up a really good point. And I think for some of us, because you and I kind of talked about this a little bit, is I think a lot of us are still suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome, or disorder. And because we all have different things that we've experienced through all of this. And I even mentioned something about, kids being affected because they can't socially interact. You mentioned and told a great story to me about a time where, here recently you were at a social function and having to have all these conversations like, gosh, I haven't done this in a while in this type of setting, right? It's, gosh, that in itself is stressful and it adds anxiety.
Yeah, it does.
And so with that being said, and you talking about all the changes that you've gone through, what does a B2B digital marketer need to be thinking about now so that they have a more successful 2022?
I think an idea that people should really consider is having a queen bee mindset. What do I mean by that? Well, a queen bee mindset in a hive, in a beehive, the entire hive is operating for one purpose, and that is the success of the queen bee that sustains and extends the hive through all the seasons. A queen bee lives 20 or 30 times longer than a drone bee does. And if you think about who's the queen bee, it's not your boss, it's not your CEO, it's your customer. And are you obsessed with keeping your customer happy? Are you obsessed with keeping your customer successful? Are you protecting your customer from competitive threats? When you are that useful to your customer, they will see so much value that you'll do a really good job acquiring when you show this mentality. But more importantly, in B2B with subscription, is that you'll be retaining your customers for longer and longer. You'll get better renewals and you'll get a better chance at upsell. That's the Queen Bee mindset.
Well, also too, when you and I were talking about some of the things that you have done personally in regards to supporting and trying to help with the bee population, because they're vital to all of us in regards to our supply chain. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really intriguing when you started really connecting all these dots for me. And if you could talk a little bit about the churn, and for drones, it's different, but when you start talking about the average loss that occurs, within a hive.
Yeah. So during the winter, there's always some loss. The hive has a full population heading into the fall, and it drops by about usually 15 to 18 to 20% if you look at like the historical numbers, but it's been creeping up to 30%, 32%, 34%. So you're getting a significant, and the hives are getting smaller. And as I look at that data and you look at, the flowers, the trees, what needs to be pollinated out there, and that they're supporting our food supply, and they're just very cool insects, I decided that I wanted to donate money to beekeepers to repopulate the hives. So I got in contact with my local beekeepers guild, which exists all over the country. And I got in touch with one of the kind of senior leaders of the guild. And he explained these things to me. So what he recommended that I do is to buy nukes. So you buy a queen bee and 3 pounds of bees. So you get 3 pounds of bees. That's enough to repopulate the 35% loss. And so beekeepers, small beekeepers or big beekeepers will welcome these kind of donations as a way to support the ecology, which supports the economy. Out here in the West, we've had terrible forest fires, and we're supposed to stay in, can't go to the gym because of COVID. And then we've got smoke outside, so you can't exercise outside. So you feel, pretty cooped up and stagnant. And that fire almost destroyed 3 ski resorts that I use in the winter. So, global warming is a concern, and it'll affect not just nature, but it'll affect the economy. So in a small way, I'm contributing to building back up the plant life food chain by being a bee investor. And that gives us the idea for this Queen Bee mindset, because once you become a bee investor, people start asking you questions about bees and they expect you to be really knowledgeable. So, I read up and I realized, we did learn a lot of this in school, and it hasn't changed in the last couple of decades. What bees do and how they populate the hives is still the same. So but when you look at the pictures and you understand that a drone bee only lives a couple of weeks and a queen bee lives 2 years, that those drones are giving everything they have to support the hive, make the honey, but it's really to support the queen. And if we put our customer up on that pedestal, in America, we say the customer is always right. In Germany, we say the customer is king. In Japan, we say the customer is a god. But that's an older phrase. This is a fresh phrase that has kind of meaning and momentum for me, and maybe now you and maybe some of your listeners. Have a queen bee mindset. Make your customer the center of your world. Don't make your product, don't make your own message talking about yourself the center of your world or the center of your story.
Well, and even when you say that, I start thinking about the other, let's just say that the ecosystem, and I start thinking about the systems that are in place. When I start thinking about the diligence, all of these things start coming more in up top of mind for me that otherwise, it wouldn't have. Because if you start, thinking about the job, right? We also start thinking about pollination, right? We start talking about, pollinating, customers. We start talking about, many different things associated with, that queen bee mindset. So if I was to, you talked about, lead gen, client acquisition and things like that, how do I make sure that I do have a queen bee mindset when I'm looking at those sides of my business?
Think about your customer more than you think about your boss. First of all, understand your customer. talk to your customer, interview your customers, sit in on customer meetings. If you're a senior executive, I mean, if you're at the working level, you're with customer, you probably are interacting with customers on the sales side or the CS side. But if you're an executive, you might be getting detached from them, looking at the reports of what's happening with the customers. Go to the meetings, listen, look for opportunities to help, add value, add commentary, show respect, show dedication to that customer. Show the customer that they mean a lot to you. But you can't go to a customer meeting for an hour and not learn. You just start writing things down, and those things are so much more relevant and important for the next executive meeting. And I've been attending and executive sponsoring a couple of calls, and a couple of customers and being in on the calls. And I've really learned a lot so that I'm getting ready to present at the executive meeting. This is my experience, and I see these opportunities for us to do better. And I mean, doing better in every way, right? Customers are happy. You can tell they're happier. One of the things I do in marketing is I'm trying to collect reviews for reputation, right? We've got multiple review platforms in B2B that we need to be represented on. G2.com, Trust Radius. And a lot of, our core business at Milestone is SEO. And Google has started to shift the algorithms so that it's showing a preference for sites that review multiple sites like yours, as opposed to promoting your site in the first position. So those more objective review sites are desirable for Google, and they're taking up a lot of positions. So it starts to be a search engine within a search engine, right? If somebody goes from Google to G2, and they look up your category, that's great. That's discovery. That's being able to be found. So all of these things, your roadmap, is your roadmap inside out or outside in? Are you inbound or outbound with the way you build your roadmap and and how you talk about it? Do you have a customer advisory board? Are you in touch with a group of executives, and do you let them guide part of what you do with your resources so that you're in a better position to serve them next year and the year after? Those are a couple of the tactics that I think are undeniably strengthening and giving you insight, strategy, empathy. And there's no doubt in my mind that when executives are that involved with a queen bee mentality and that you'll get better retention. The customer gets it. The customer feels it. The customer feels supported. I think, isn't that the number one reason people give bad reviews on Yelp? It's not because the food was so bad. It's because the service was bad, right? You get a little bit angry at somebody who is really, really sharp with you or really, unhelpful. And or you asked for something politely and they responded impolitely, then they get a bad review. But people don't generally go crushing, small businesses with 1 stars. You think maybe it was a off day, or my meal wasn't great, but maybe I'll give them another try another time, or give them a 3, or I probably just won't review them because they seem nice, right? That matters a lot to people, that they think you care about them, and that then people are better versions of themselves when you treat them that way.
Well, you bring up an interesting point. Okay, so if I'm thinking that Google's going through and looking and changing the algorithm to give favor, to those types of websites. A lot of people, you also use those in affiliate marketing. I think G2 and those sites are somewhat affiliate, driven as well. That's how a lot of the revenue is created, is, did all of this make a sale? It starts bringing in this whole credibility issue. So for many, many years, many of us would question when we would hear certain statistics, and I think the skepticism in our society is just increasing at an ever increasing rate. So is there a risk for us? Say, hey, I want to go through from a strategy perspective and try to get listed, try to get posted, whatever the case may be, within those sites, and then it potentially backfire because then now the algorithm changes? I mean, how long can this sustain itself?
Yeah. So being in the search industry for a long time, we say don't chase the algorithm. Don't react every week and every month, but do react every quarter, every other quarter, and change the direction you're traveling. If you personally are seeing these kind of sites come up higher, Yelp or TripAdvisor or these B2B sites for your audience, and you want to go get reviews, you can't go wrong, because in order to get a legitimate review, and those sites check very carefully that you are who you say you are on LinkedIn, that you make sense, that you could be a customer of your company or my company. So they're well verified. It's just goodness. And the reviews that come from the Queen Bee mindset of focusing on a customer enough so that you can even ask. I mean, have you ever had been in a customer situation, you think, oh, I'd like to get a testimonial or I'd like to get a review, but the account needs a little help. Like, it's not the right time to ask, or you ask CS or sales, like, don't ask right now. We're fixing something. Let's get that fixed. Let's show them the love. Then let's ask for it. We get that review and we've adjusted our strategy, but we are aligned with a greater philosophy of Queen Bee mindset, that we're treating this person as the most important thing into the future of our company. And I got a review. There's nothing will ever go bad for you having that review. Worst case is if Google doesn't drive traffic there, you could drive your customers there manually and say, hey, if you want to check out what some of our recent customers have said about us, have a look here. You could do it manually. You're not even dependent on Google, but Google is not whimsical. It doesn't change things. It doesn't change things significantly month to month, even year to year. I like to say that Google isn't going somewhere different. Google has arrived at where it said it was always going. So after the first 20 years, Sergey and Larry worked in the search division, and now they've moved on to other parts of Alphabet because I think they did what they intended to do. They intended to make a smart search engine that is able to match intent to content, to the listings, and answer people's questions. That's what search does. And this is the part of the long-term version of answering their questions, but you can't get reviews unless you have happy customers. And you can't be on these sites unless you have reviews.
And well, and so for me, I think I had mentioned this a second ago, but I even, like I said, start thinking about this Queen Bee ecosystem. Well, Google's part of that ecosystem. Absolutely.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So if I start thinking about think about impact to the queen, impact to the hive, and you can think about your customers and all that, like you were saying, is and my company is serving all of that. What are some of the major pillars that I need to focus in on, to make sure that I'm successful, with the Queen Bee mindset?
Well, it's the drones, right? The drones are what makes the hive. So do you have the right staffing levels, and do you have the right account cover? You have the right people covering the right amount of accounts. So you need to be efficient, you want to be profitable, but is there enough slack in the book that each CS person has so that they get enough attention, they get enough resources, enough honey and honeycomb and chances and flowers to pollinate, and is there enough capacity? That's part of it. Another part is the marketing budget itself is part of the ecosystem, right? Do you do a customer event? Do you do webinars? Do you do training? Do you do certification? All these things are for the customer, but they engage with you, and they appreciate you, and it makes you customer-centric rather than going back to the factory and coming up with new software or new hardware, new products, right? That's the focus of some people, but focus of sales and marketing and the executives should be on this ecosystem. Do you have a customer advisory board? Do you just call up your customers and talk to them like we're talking now? What customer wouldn't appreciate a 15-minute conversation while they're in the car, traveling somewhere? How many of your customers, how about this for ecosystem? Think about it on a device basis. How many of your customers are on speed dial? How many customers are in your phone, like they're stored in your phone because you call them a lot, or you want to know when they're calling you and it comes up? Can you text your customers? Is that okay? Can you Slack them or text them? Like, are you that familiar with them? And as a marketer, when people have these kind of Queen Bee mindset that they know where the queen is, and they can, the queen knows they're supporting them, so they're totally good with you contacting them. When they're that close, everything we do in marketing gets a little bit easier. If I need a testimony, if I need somebody to do a video, if I want to interview somebody, if I need feedback on something, the people in your speed dial that pay you money are people, you're in the same hive together. Those are some of the ecosystem and some of the symbols and some of the evidence of that you're getting this right, that you're being, customer centric, like, it's a phrase that's been around. It's a little bit tired now. There's nothing wrong with it. But what does it mean? And I think when we think about it this way, and I think we all like bees, I think most people like bees unless you're super allergic to them, but we like the fruit and the vegetables and the food supply that they bring to us. And they've got a cool society, right, that they've put together. And if we use a fresh analogy, we can open our mind. This is what thought leadership, this is why people like podcasts like yours, Jim, is because you bring a fresh perspective to something we all already knew to be true, but we needed something to shake us a little bit and to excite us and to motivate us towards being better B2B marketers.
Well, hey, man, I appreciate that because sometimes people need an adult beverage or two for me to make sense.
Yeah, that's good too. But talking about bees, it's weird. Since I became a bee investor, this story kind of can't go wrong. I was talking about that party I went to last night, and I forgot to talk about the bees. I talked about some things that maybe weren't as fun for people. But every time I bring it up, people smile. And now that we've talked about bees and we've extended it to a Queen Bee mindset that is customer obsessed. I got this idea from Forrester. We became a Forrester customer a couple months ago, and you get feedback. You do inquiries with your analysts, and you get feedback. And this is one of their themes. And we were advised by the trainer who teaches you how to engage with your analysts and get value from your subscription. Is that talk to our themes? How customer obsessed are you? And customer obsessed is good. It's strong. It's a psychologically kind of a strong word, but I think it makes it easier to remember. And so we're so customer obsessed that we're not going to tell you about our product. We're just going to tell you about how customers use our product, customers like A and customers like B, because we're customer obsessed. And we started to use the word, and it creates a real shift. Like, you report to the CEO or the president, and you think like, what would they approve? Like you start, there's a certain amount of censorship that you do to yourself by what your boss wants to see and not see. And that's not ideal. The right question is, what's the right thing for the customer? What's the right thing for the business? And that's almost the same thing. If you get the customer in front of it, the business thrives behind it, like a field that's been pollinated. So it's like pollinate your pipeline. How are you going to have a fruitful harvest if you don't have customers giving you referrals, if you don't have good reputation, if you don't have good case studies? I mean, have you ever been in a B2B situation where you're selling something and nobody has any case studies, and the salespeople like marketing? I joined a company a number of years ago, and I met the director of sales, and he said, "Nice to meet you. Welcome. We need case studies." I said, "Okay, I'm going to be working on this and this and this and this." And he goes, "That's great. We need case studies. Can you get case studies?" And by the end of the conversation, I said, "Let me see if I've got this straight. You want case studies, right?" So I just started cranking out a huge library of case studies. Those case studies still exist. And just because they're not a customer doesn't mean they weren't happy at the time or they weren't successful at the time we captured the case study. So there's nothing wrong with the older case studies that now cover 20 industries, 2 or 3 deep. It took a long time to build, but that's what he wanted. And, that and the testimonies.
Well, I mean, I think that's a great story, and it reminds me of a time that I was at a conference and trade show. Of course, this was pre-COVID, and it was a conference where it was all about, customer service and contact centers. And I went up to this one booth, and the person who was the, VP of business development, starts telling me about his organization. And I'm probably one of those people that is probably not a good one, to introduce or to talk to at a trade show, because for me, I want to help people. And so I started asking him all these questions, and I'm listening to his pitch, and then he started telling me this story about how their folks, and they're a BPO, business process outsourcer, and they have a lot of folks that are offshore, and in a couple of their places of employment, their contact centers, what they do is they actually give their employees milk subsidies and stipends because milk is extremely expensive. that, vital, right? And, kind of like bees. And I said, well, there's 15 other BPO providers that are in this conference. I said, if somebody was to come up to me and say, well, what is it that you do? I'd say, we buy milk. And he goes, what? I said, that's exactly what I would say. I said, we buy milk. And because people are going to say, well, what do you mean? And then it gives me an opportunity.
Gets the conversation started, right? They're like, you get them to ask you a question. Now you're engaged, as opposed to blying at people, spraying your pitch.
In addition, and the way that he talked about that milk subsidy and stuff is the value of their drone, the value of those employees to the organization, that they went that far to go ahead and help to make those purchases for those people that they otherwise wouldn't be able to make on their own regular salary, given the job that they were doing in that marketplace. And I said, that's your differentiator amongst all these other 15 BPO providers, is how you invest and care, about your people. I said, so that's what I would say when people ask me, what is it that we do? Because it would give me a chance to now talk about our differentiation. And he goes, this is what he said to me. My boss would never let me do that.
Yeah, that's not good. He didn't even test it, right? Jim, what do you think about this adjustment to the milk? We buy a lot of milk. It's like a lot. So it's not like a little bit. It's like we're a huge milk buyer in our neighborhoods because we are employee centric. And then I think you have to extend the milk. You've got the milk as the hook. You've got your drone. You've got your the people who make the hive. Without that, the business doesn't survive. And we support our employees with the milk because we want our happy employees provide better service. And better service means better results for you. Your business grows and our business renews. That's why we buy a lot of milk.
Absolutely.
It's a good quick story.
I mean, I think we all have opportunities that are just kind of sitting there, and most oftentimes they're right on the surface, balking, squawking at us and stinging us, for that matter, but unfortunately we don't pay attention, or like you said, we feel inhibited, that'll never fly. Right.
Right. So the antidote to that is to ask the question, what's the best thing to do for the customer? What's right for the customer? What's right for the company? And when you have that conversation with your directors and your senior managers, and then when you want to go defend the decision that you made, you said, we think that this is better for the customer. Very, very, very difficult for the executive to disagree on the spot. They might give it some thought. They might weigh the options and then come back and say, I'd rather do it this way. But you just can't go wrong talking about the customers. And if you're in a company that thinks there's something wrong with that, leave.
That's true. And that's the tough decision. Okay. So now this also leads me into, because I talk about this a lot, is creative thinking and innovation. I mean, I just talked about, us doing a lot of the things that we've done on this show. We're talking about, creative thinking and being more innovative. Is that one worry? And so you have to tell me how we need to address this. One worry is that when I start thinking about drones, it's like, dude, you got a job and that's only the job you're doing. So if I'm thinking about the people who are a part of my organization, who are serving the Queen, my customer, is that if they're just, following and not, taking a moment to do some of that creative thinking that we had talked about, we could be in trouble because it's going to ultimately impact and affect that customer. It's going to affect us.
Yeah, we're being a little bit playful with our analogy and staying in the hive with the roles that are in the hive. But we're talking about smart drones. We're talking about what's beautiful about drones and beehives is their dedication to the success of the hive and the queen, and supporting that. That's their whole purpose in life. They're very committed. That's the part we like. Are we saying that you shouldn't be thinking? Bees, when the hive gets too big, in the spring, if the hive is really thriving, the drones have to go out and scout for a new location. They have to go and find a new hive. They know how to do these things. So they have a couple of different playbooks. But yes, we do need people to be creative. And I struggled with being maybe too original and too creative. And what I didn't do early in my career was follow directions. Just get the thing done. Just word for word, do what my boss wants, because my boss has 10 or 15 years more work experience than I do. And I wrote this in my book, Hack the Corporate Fast Track, on like how do you get promoted in a corporation is you have to manage up, and you have to be manageable, and you have to be coachable, and you have to follow directions. That's the foundation of learning the ropes for, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years of the first parts of your career. That's where you get skills. That's where you want to be mentored, and that behavior will make you, it will endear the people above you to teach you and to support you. Now, from there, once you have all the basics down and there's no leakage in the boat here, then you can build new things. Then you can propose new things, and you can all the way along, but it makes more sense for you to prove that you've understood the basics and the fundamentals like you would in football or basketball or baseball or swimming, whatever sport you like. You get your fundamentals right. Water skiing, you get your body posture right when you're on a wakeboard, and it's so much easier to ski as opposed to just trying to go straight to jumping the wake.
Well, that makes sense. And thanks for sharing about the whole scouting thing and all that. It kind of, again, it gives us a different perspective and the ability to, look at maybe old things that we haven't looked at in a new light. And again, think about, what are we talking about as far as, the success, of the organization, the success of our customers, and how all of those things are just vitally linked with one another. Erik, I tell you, I've had a great time chatting with you. How does the bee, well, actually, you know what? Let me do this. Because I think this is important. There are a whole lot of things that are changing right now. We had talked about this. And if I'm to look and go back to that whole pollinating and making a better, more successful 2022, if I had a scenario or a situation where I didn't have any constraints, I could do whatever I want, right? I don't have those executives sitting above me, squashing me. I don't have all that happen. If I'm a B2B digital marketer, what should I start doing?
I think one of the big trends and the demands as you work more closely with sales is segmentation and targeting and being relevant and helpful. So we can go back to the Google analogy. The algorithm is written to pick out the things that are the most relevant and the most helpful, and to some degree more personalized and targeted to the particular query you give Google. That's a pretty good analogy for B2B, that each of the people we talk to wants us to be relevant. Everybody wants to know that you have experience in their industry, a little bit of domain expertise. So you got to, you can't serve every industry from the beginning if you're a smaller mid-sized company. So pick out 3 or 4 industries and make sure you've got successful customers in those industries. Make sure you've got case studies, and then start to customize your deck. And if you're on the marketing side, and modularize your deck. So rather than making a lot of different decks, like pick A, B, or C, right? So that you make a kind of a formula for your salespeople to be able to react to, the pitch that they need to do. So what else do you have to do for segmentation? You have to talk their language, right? You have to listen and understand enough that you can, whether to say bookings or transactions or sales or, funnel or journey. Don't use your own nomenclature, use their nomenclature, walk in their shoes, as we were told when we were little kids, but we didn't really understand that part of empathy. Like, empathy is so complicated. It takes, I don't know if really young people can understand empathy in their head. It took me a long time to figure it out as an adult. What does it mean? What am I supposed to do? And I've got an interesting insight. I've been trying to figure out empathy pretty actively for 3 or 4 years. And I have some people that I mentor that I throw every mentoring session. I just got a question I wanted to ask you. What is empathy? And empathy is understanding what somebody else is feeling, what their experience, but really more importantly, what they need, and providing that to them. That will prove that you're empathetic. Like, it's good to be understood, but what people really want is a solution. So think about a baby for a minute, a little baby that's like 6 months old, baby's crying. If you're a new father, you think, baby's crying. It's hurting my ears and stuff. Somebody with more experience as a parent, a man or a woman, thinks the baby's hungry. The baby needs a diaper change. And you go and do that for the baby, and the baby's happy. That using empathy allows you to have that queen bee mentality. and that Queen Bee mindset to go and solve the problem. So I often like to talk about it. It comes up a little bit in marketing, but so many other things come up: OKRs and metrics and KPIs and rev and growth and momentum and market cap and value and all the things that are truly economic. But, how many boardrooms are talking about empathy, and empathy as the mechanism, as the bridge to help us solve customer problems? And as a salesperson, if that's what you're building, so understand your customer. So maybe that's marketing's job to do that. Do a lot of listening on behalf of sales, because sales is a little bit more like a drone. They do the same task over and over. Marketing does 20 tasks once or a couple times a quarter. And so maybe it's marketing's job to go out, listen, understand, and build a solution. And for God's sakes, make the story interesting, marketing. Make it easier for people to be memorable, like the way Jim does in these podcasts.
Erik Newton, I've had a good time chatting with you today. Can you please share with the B2B DM gang how they can get in touch with you?
Sure. My company is milestoneinternet.com. You can find me on LinkedIn at Erik Newton, ErikNewton. And if you want to connect with me, tell them that Jim Rembach sent you, and make it even more clear where I got the leads. Thanks so much, Jim.
Erik Newton, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Go now to join the B2B DM gang in the B2B Marketer LinkedIn group, where you can connect with other B2B DM disruptors and get access to our B2B DM cheat sheets, checklist, and guides. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, please help by going to iTunes to rate, review, and subscribe. And share the show on all of your digital platforms. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. And always remember, you can automate your lead capture, but you must lure your lead.